So we are kickstarting our series this week by focusing on how to cope in quarantine and isolation. And we hope that starting with this will be quite grounding and provide you with really relevant tips and resources for the weeks to come. So in this video, I chat to Katie, who is one of our lovely mental health advisors. She is absolutely brilliant at what she does. And we're really lucky to be able to chat to her today. So the role of the mental health advisors at the university within our service is to work with students who have had or are currently experiencing moderate to severe mental health difficulties. And so she works with these students to support them and to help them manage these difficulties throughout their time at university. So it is absolutely fantastic to be able to chat to her today and get her thoughts on things and some really great advice, which I have already benefited from. So yeah, continue watching. We chat about how to deal with uncertainty, loss of motivation, difficult relationships at home, and many other things. So continue watching and check it out. Hey Katie.
Hi Jess.
How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. I'm enjoying the weather. That's definitely helping the mood a bit.
Yeah, it's come back. It was raining before, so I'm really glad the sun's back.
I think raining it down isn't, I think bucketing it down is probably more accurate, but there we go.
I know, it made me realise how much the weather affects my mood as well. I'm so much happier when the sun's out.
I've been thinking about that as well with lockdown, as to, you know, it's not much fun to be stuck inside when the weather's lovely, but I can't help thinking this would be a lot worse if it was November and it was getting darker every day.
Yeah. Yes, so that's one thing we can be grateful for. Okay, so thanks for chatting with me. Obviously today we're going to be discussing how to cope in quarantine and isolation, and I'm really happy that we've got you so you can give us some advice, and yeah, I'm just going to go straight into it if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
So one thing that I know I've been really struggling with, and I'm sure a lot of other people are, is just this really strong sense of uncertainty and just not knowing what's going to happen. And I just wondered whether you had any advice on sort of how to cope with this, or at least become more comfortable with uncertainty.
I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is just how important it is to normalize that discomfort. We don't like uncertainty as a species. We're not made for that. We're made for patterns and for reading situations and seeing what we can work out and what we can predict from them. It's how we survive for thousands of years, because, you know, it's, if you see some shadows in a bush, you need to know if it's a tiger or not, and it's better to think that it's a tiger and run away from a bush than it is to be eaten by the tiger. So we always err towards seeing patterns even when there aren't any, and that makes it particularly hard to be in a situation that's this uncertain. So the fact that people are struggling with it is what I would expect. It's normal. And I suppose, you know, it's worth remembering that there is some certainty in this, even when it feels like there isn't. We know that it will end. We don't know exactly when, we don't know exactly how, but it will end. Change is a constant process. It's unavoidable. It's part of life. And sometimes that can be a wonderful thing because it means bad things end. But, you know, of course, it also means that good things do. Trying to really sort of, I suppose, embrace that realization is possibly the best advice I can give in a situation like this. Just know that you're not the only person that finds it difficult. Know that it's normal to find it difficult, and know that it will end at some point.
Yeah. So that actually is a certainty that we can hold on to. We might not know the timelines, but we do know it will end. And yeah, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's good. I think, I mean, speaking of uncertainty, I think that maybe one thing I've been doing to try and sort of find answers or alleviate that sense of uncertainty is consume a lot more news and you know, consume a lot more social media. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get a little pop up at the end of each week that says my screen time each day, and it's honestly embarrassing. But yeah, I've really noticed that that's increased for me. And I wondered whether this is sort of healthy or unhealthy, and whether this could actually be having a negative effect on my well-being.
I think potentially yes, although I suppose, with social media, it's a how long is a piece of string situation. It really depends what you're using it for. Definitely, I think there was a period towards the start of this when it was very difficult to not feel pulled into watching the news every day, and reading every article that you could. And that was that natural response to uncertainty and wanting to find some kind of answer or certainty. But yeah, ideally, it's probably better to keep a bit of a limit on that, because it's likely to be feeding anxiety. The other thing is that when we read the news and we consume social media, we're seeing a really narrow slice of the real world. It tends to focus either on the best 5% or the worst 5%. You've got Instagram, where someone's having a great time and they're learning how to bake, and then you've got the news and the death toll figures, and it misses the 90% in the middle of life that is every day. That's people waking up and brushing their teeth and tying their shoes, and it can feel like life is made of extremes in a way that it really just isn't. So it's about, I suppose, trying to remember that and trying to keep your focus as much as you can on the 90% of life that is just normal and really very little unchanged for most of us. And if people are feeling a bit sort of overwhelmed by the news, I think it's always worth, there's a Mr. Rogers idea about looking for the helpers. I think he said, somebody wrote to him and said they were frightened by the news, and he said, in any situation that's frightening, always look for the helpers, because there always will be helpers. And we know that. I mean, 750,000 people signed up to volunteer for the NHS in a week and a half or something.
Wow.
People really, really want to help in this situation, and that can be a reassuring thing to remember when everything feels a little bit chaotic.
There's a lot of hope going on at the same time.
People rediscover to come out of this potentially, and if we can try and keep our feet in the here and now, focus on what's happening during our days and not actually what's happening other places in the world that we can't control, that will go a long way to making it feel a little bit more bearable.
I think what you were just saying a minute ago about the best 5% and the worst 5% is so true. I mean, I've always sort of known, a lot of us have this awareness that social media is the best. It's everyone displaying the best things of their life, the best holidays they're going on, and they're putting out there what they want to put out there. And I've always really tried to sort of be careful on my own social media, and I do try and show the not so great days as well as the great days. But actually, now that I think about it, I'm still showing that best 5% and worst 5%, and it's so true that you just don't see the normality that's in everyone's day-to-day lives. So that really struck me, actually. And something else though that I wanted to ask is, that something that's filling up my feed is lots of quotes about bettering yourself during this time, or learning a new language or a new talent, or getting a new hobby, and coming out of this as a better person than you went in it. Lots of things like that on my social media, and it really made me wonder whether those kind of goals, or goals in general, are helpful or unhelpful to have whilst we're in quarantine.
I mean, it depends. It's not an absolute answer, because it depends where you're starting from. If someone feels like what they're trying to do at the moment is survive, then I think goals are not going to be helpful, and potentially they're going to be punitive. And there's an idea now that sometimes social media represents something called toxic positivity, which is positivity used to make somebody feel that they're not doing enough or they're not trying enough. It's okay to just feel that you want to get to the other side of this in one piece. That is a goal. That's something absolutely to strive for. And if you just get there, then well done, because this is a real challenge. On the other hand, if you feel like you've got energy to spare, or you really need some kind of project or something to work towards, then it can never hurt to set a goal. It doesn't have to be something like learning a new language or learning a new skill. It could just be getting to know one of your family members a little bit better, or trying to have a different type of conversation with your friends from what you normally have, or one of the things that I'm always a big advocate for, taking up something that you enjoy even if you're not good at it.
Yeah.
You know, these things don't have to be huge achievements. Productivity isn't the be all and end all of human life, and I think we you know, I think we do ourselves damage if we think that it is.
Yeah. I like that sort of, that coming to the end of this and getting through this is a goal in itself.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really important for a lot of people to hear, myself included. And yeah, like you said, I guess there will be people who they need to engage in something new, or they've got enough energy for that, and that's also great, and that's really positive. But it is an achievement to get through this time, and it's a positive one. And I guess I wonder as well whether there are any other positive aspects that might come out of this time.
Yeah, I think there could potentially be a few. They won't necessarily be for everybody, so it's not a kind of, you know, if you're just having a rubbish time and trying to get through it, that's fine. But I think there's some benefits to being bored. I don't think we often think that these days, but it's very good for creativity and problem solving, being bored.
Yeah.
You know, you're much more likely to come up with something interesting to do that you've not done before if you've got a period of boredom.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to see what is and isn't working in your life. You know, I mean, I know some people who've moved out of London and are finding that actually being in the countryside, it works much better for them than being in a city did. Or maybe they find that actually they needed the day-to-day interaction with people more than they thought they did. There's been a radical wholesale change, so you can suddenly say, hey, that thing was helping and that thing wasn't.
Yeah.
And there's a chance to realize that and to think about what you might do differently, or what you could try and take with you when life goes back to normal again. But again, not everything has to be positive. Some things can just be neutral, and they just are until they're over. That's fine. We don't always need to be finding the positive in life. People are likely to be feeling frustrated or sad or scared, and those are all completely okay feelings as well, and not ones to feel that we have to stifle in any way or replace with kind of positivity. You know, it's very, very human to feel those things right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I agree exactly what you're saying, and you know, a lot of my friends too, I've noticed they have been so busy, they've never had any sort of opportunity like this to reflect or just think about what's going on that works for them at the minute and what doesn't. And I think whilst we're talking about sort of self-awareness and reflecting, I think one thing I've also noticed a lot of is a lot of reminders on, well, all around really, the news, the media, my friends, my family, sort of reminding me, you know, look after your mental health. And on the news, it's always make sure you're looking after your mental health, or emails from work, and which is really important. But I wonder how we can know if our mental health is getting worse.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. I think it's important to say that everyone has a mental health status. It's not just people who are struggling with an illness who have we all have mental health, just like we all have health.
Yeah.
So even people who have never had a diagnosis or wouldn't in any way consider themselves to have a mental health problem, taking care of their mental health is still something that needs to be done, and they might still notice some impacts on it, even if they're not as severe as they might be for other people. There are a few sort of common ones that we tend to see a lot. So those would be changes to sleep, either sleeping a lot more or sleeping a lot less. And the same for food, eating a lot more or eating a lot less.
Yeah.
You might find that you're quicker to anger or to tears than you normally would be. You might find that your body doesn't kind of really match up with what you want to be doing, so that when you're trying to be calm to go to sleep, you're feeling really alert. Or that when you want to be alert and go and do something, you're feeling really tired and heavy. You might find you're distracting yourself with things more than you ordinarily would, that you're choosing to watch repeats on Netflix over and over again, when ordinarily you might be doing some work or doing something creative. That might be because you're trying to avoid how you're feeling potentially. I think energy being very low and things feeling very heavy in your body. That's quite a common one as well. But in reality, those are the kind of the common ones we would see a lot. But everybody will have at least some individual ones that are unique to them as well. And the way to learn about those, and actually this period of time is a very good opportunity for that. It's just paying attention. It's just paying attention to what happens to you. And you can only really do that in quiet periods, or in, like we say, like in periods of boredom.
Yeah.
Which creates that opportunity. And I mean, I know for myself that when I'm sad, I breathe out much deeper than I normally do.
Yeah.
Or when I'm anxious or nervous, I can feel tingling in my arms. And I only learn those through paying attention. So knowing those helps me in the longer term, because it helps me figure out what I'm feeling when it might be feeling confusing otherwise.
Yeah.
I really, anyone who feels able to devote some time to getting to know those parts of themselves now, I think that could be a really good opportunity.
Yeah. And I think all of those things, talking about the common and maybe the more sort of personal to you, is really important for everyone right now, because as you're saying, like, we really need to emphasize that point that everyone does have a mental health. And I guess sort of following on from that, I think there potentially might be people who are at home as well, where there are strained relationships, whether that's strained between yourself and someone else, or you're just a witness and in this environment where things are a bit difficult at home. And do you have any advice on that?
I mean, I think that's one that is a really important one to raise, because there must be a lot of people right now who are not just in homes where it's uncomfortable, but potentially in homes where it's unsafe.
Yeah.
Who really don't have many other opportunities to stay somewhere else, who are quite stuck. And I think it's really important to remind everybody that there was some guidance issued by the police. I think we can share the link. That if necessary leaving home, that people can move between homes as long as doing so is sincerely moving and not just visiting, for a cooling off period. So I think it's, if people are in a situation that feels unsafe to them and there is somewhere else they can go, then they are allowed to do that under the current rules. But obviously it's important to keep checking that when those are updated. I suppose the other thing is that really, where possible, then if you can't leave home, the priorities for you need to be about boundaries and space. So that's about what boundaries you put around yourself, or potentially that you decide for yourself that you're going to need other people to follow, whether they will or not is a separate question, but that you would like to request, and about creating space for yourself. Can you go on walks without the rest of your family, or encourage them to go on walks without you, so that you can get some time alone? Is there a space within the family home that you can sort of retreat to a little bit? Do you have a clear sense of what the things are that are making the environment feel unsafe or uncomfortable for you? And if it's safe to do so, not necessarily comfortable, because it's very rarely going to be comfortable, but if it feels safe to do so, can you talk to your family about what those things are? Is it possible to say, I think I need a little bit of space right now, and can you not talk to me for a little while?
That's okay.
It's okay. I mean, people won't necessarily hear you, and they won't necessarily want to do what you've asked them to, but at least then you will have said to yourself, that's what I need, and that's an okay thing to need.
Definitely. And I think, again, continuing along these lines, I would imagine that maybe some people have gone back home, they've gone to university. Lots of our students are becoming independent, and now they've gone home, and perhaps their parents are sort of maybe treating them a bit like teenagers again, or maybe those people find themselves even behaving like a teenager. And I just wonder if you sort of had any advice for that situation.
This is a really common one, and it tends to sort of drag on all the way through people's 20s, unfortunately. And sometimes parents never really get to grips with the fact that we aren't who we were when we left home. They only know you as you were when you left. They don't know the ways that you've grown up in the years since, and the things that you've had to do to be independent. So it is natural for them to be treating you in that way. And sometimes that can be hard for people to shift. It can either take a while, or they might be a little bit resistant to the idea of you being a different person from who you were. And the reality is that if they start to treat you that way, then it may well be that you will regress back into behaving in the same way as you did when you were last living at home. So, I mean, I know I spent, many years feeling like a teenager when I went back home, and it took a long time to shift that. It's okay, again, to talk to people about these things, to say that the way you feel when somebody treats you in a particular way.
Yeah.
And it's also worth trying to be aware of yourself, I suppose. It's going to be, if you've fallen back into the patterns of behaving the same way as you did before you left, then it's going to be a lot easier for parents to feel that they're justified in treating you that way.
Yeah.
How to think about, are you taking on the same number of the adult responsibilities in the house, I suppose? Are you cooking an equal number of meals? Are you walking the dog as much as everybody else?
Yeah.
And if you are, then it's completely reasonable to say, you need to treat me differently, or I would like you to treat me differently.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily going to be an easy conversation to have, but if you've taken responsibility for your half of the dynamic, because it is a shared dynamic, it's going to be a lot harder for them to not take responsibility for their half of it.
Yeah. That's really good advice. I'm sure so many people can relate to that. And it's really interesting about how the sort of regressing and sort of responding to the way someone's treating you by then behaving that way. And that's, I think, something that's really just good to just be aware of. I think we've spoken quite a lot now about sort of familial relationships, and for a lot of our students who are going home, but I wonder as well how quarantine and isolation might also be affecting friendships. And I know that, I really miss a lot of my friends, but video chats, they're just not really the same. It can be quite hard to sort of connect and relate in the same way. And I just wonder if you have any advice on this as well.
I mean, video chats aren't the same. They just aren't, are they? And
No.
I mean, I think that it's okay to tell people that, to say to your friends, I miss you and I really want to be having conversation with you, but I just don't think video chats are the same. Chances are you'll find they'll say the same thing. It's much better to do that than to just not call them and sort of feel then that you miss them all the more. And then I guess try and get creative about ways that you could still stay in contact, which aren't that. It might be that when all this is over, your friends are going to feel a lot more fond of letters that you wrote them during this period, or a piece of art you made them, or something that the articles you sent them and have ideas about than they will about the video chats. It's okay to find different ways to try to, anything is connection. Anything you do for someone else is connection, and it doesn't have to be Zoom.
Love that. That's refreshing. That's refreshing to hear right now. I think for me personally as well, I find video chats often just quite tiring, and they just feel like they require a lot more energy and focus, and that's quite hard. It feels quite contradictory if I'm saying I really miss you, but I find this form of chatting quite difficult. And but a lot of that I think is to do with my sleep, and that's something that I know I'm probably going to keep banging on about in this series, but I personally really do struggle with my sleep, and I think that might exacerbate sort of how tired I feel, trying to keep up this level of connection with all my friends and my family. And so I guess I just really wanted to be not cheeky, but sort of it's self-serving in a way, but I know many people will benefit. Can you give me any advice on just healthy sleep habits?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as a starting point, we tend to talk about sleep hygiene, because those are the parts that in some ways are the most obvious and also the hardest to do. Sleep hygiene is the things that you do before sleep to make it more likely that you will sleep. So it's things like having a regular bedtime and a regular waking up time, trying to keep your bedroom as just for sleep. I know that's very hard for a lot of people who are sleeping and working in the same room. Please, I implore people, put a sheet over your desk. You need to be able to see all your textbooks at 11 o'clock at night when you're trying to sleep. That's not conducive. So separating off areas as best you can, doing things to make the sleeping environment feel nicer, so changing your sheets and making your bed before you get into it. There's some evidence that a drop in temperature before body temperature before sleep can help you to sleep. So that's why they recommend a warm drink or a bath, because your body cools down afterwards.
Interesting.
So things which warm you up prior to bed tend to be helpful.
Okay.
And then there's obviously limitations of screen time before bed.
Yeah.
Let's say you've done all of that and you still can't sleep. And of course that is common for a lot of people, and probably more so at the moment because anxiety is higher.
Yeah.
I personally would say it's probably better to not stay in bed for hours and hours if you can't sleep.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would wait until I got to the point where I was starting to feel a bit frustrated, and then I would get up. I would go into another room. I would turn the light on. I would do something awake, not necessarily video games, but a book.
Okay.
And then I would try again and essentially tell myself it was a new bedtime. And I would do that, I suppose, really for as many times as was bearable or felt necessary.
Okay.
And unfortunately, and this is the slightly brutal part, the idea is then to get up at the same time as you would have done. So that even if you only fall asleep at 4 a.m., you still get up at 8. It will hurt. It will hurt for the length of that day.
Yeah.
But you stand a much better chance of sleeping that night.
Yeah.
Things become self-perpetuating otherwise. You can't sleep, so you sleep later, so then you can't sleep the next day. It's all about keeping to as firm a routine as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I suppose the last thing I'd say would be, if you are struggling to sleep because you're anxious, or possibly you think it might be because you're anxious, then anything you can do during the day to express those anxieties is likely to help. Whether that's talking to someone about them or writing them down. Writing them down I love, because then it's almost symbolically they're closed in a book that you've put over there. They're not
that's nice
around. Anything you can do to express them and contain them is going to help, rather than just sort of letting them rattle around in your head.
I think often, like you're saying, sleep is one of those things, like the more you get frustrated and the more you try and fix it, sort of like the worse it gets, because you're just constantly thinking about it. So but I think I'm definitely not very good at, I might do a couple of those tips that I've heard about, but I also might not then follow it through with the other helpful tips. I might think, well, I'm doing X about it, so why isn't it working? But actually I'm not sort of doing it, seeing it as a whole, where it is helpful to have all these helpful habits that all help. So I think I'll definitely take some of those tips away and probably share them with a few of my friends who I know also struggle with their sleep at the minute. So and I guess another thing that sleep for me affects is my motivation, and I'm sure that's again across the board, but there are so many things at the minute that have stopped for us, but there are also a lot of things that have to continue, and it's all happened so quickly. And I think especially for our students who have to study, and those of us that have to work, and it's a very strange sort of, some things we can't do, other things we have to keep doing, and that becomes very difficult when that motivation is lost or affected. So do you have any advice on how to cope with this, or manage that loss of motivation?
I mean, the first thing I'd say is, I think, give up on the idea that you're likely to be able to get motivated right now. It's just I think if we're saying to ourselves we ought to be able to feel motivated to revise in the middle of a global pandemic, we're maybe slightly more optimistic about human nature than we should be. I mean, I think so many of the things that normally produce motivation in all of us, but particularly for students, are gone right now. They're not on campus. They're not seeing their lecturers in person. They're not talking to their classmates after and between lectures. They're not in an environment that's sort of geared towards academia, and one with history and kind of prestige and so on. And there's a lot going on that's anxiety provoking, and they're probably trying to live several different lives in one place at the moment, a family life, a work life, and so on. I would say it's pretty unrealistic to think that you could maintain your motivation through that. So I would really hope that people are forgiving themselves if they're finding it harder right now. Unfortunately, when motivation is lacking and we still have something we have to do at that point, it becomes about routine and discipline, which is much less fun. And really that just means you have to build yourself a schedule and then do the very best that you can to stick to it. it doesn't need to be a punitive schedule. It can be filled with in fact, I'd encourage it to be filled with the fun things as well. I like a routine schedule that says an hour of work and then an hour of Netflix. It's not, you don't want to look at it and feel defeated by the 8 hours of revision you've given yourself that day.
Yeah.
Reminding yourself that actually this is about life being much fuller than just your course. So try to build a routine that has downtime in it as well. Try to put the less fun things at the start of the day and the more fun things at the end of the day. If you have to start small so that it's 20 minutes of work one day and then 25 the next day, then that's better than not doing anything, certainly. And I suppose it's try and give yourself a break about it, because your mind and body right now are reacting to something that feels potentially much more threatening and significant than your deadlines, and it's going to be hard to keep your mind on those when there's so much else that's going on besides. You can't forgive yourself for that.
Be kind to yourself is basically what we're saying. It's really important.
It's really important.
And I think just what you're saying about like those little bits, even if it is only 20 minutes or 25 minutes, like that's good. That's an achievement, and it's better than doing nothing, and it's important to recognize that. I think that we've chatted a lot about potentially the difficulties and the struggles of quarantine and isolation, but I want to end with a final question that I have, actually from an external source. They've said, I seem to be doing much better. I'm enjoying being home, I'm sleeping better, I'm eating better, and I'm feeling calmer. But everyone I know is having a terrible time and I feel really guilty. What can I do?
Enjoy it, I think. It doesn't, maybe don't tell your friends too often how amazing at the time you're having, because they might not be in a place to hear it. But you having a much better time of it doesn't diminish, it doesn't make their time any worse. Both can be true. There are going to be people who will come out of this with a significant improvement in their life, and other people who will have a really dreadful time, and that's just life. That's not, we can't, when the good times come, make the most of them, take advantage of them, enjoy them, and don't apologize for them.
I think that thing about guilt as well is, I mean, think about how you would feel if your friend was actually doing really well. Like, you'd feel really happy for them, and you wouldn't want them to feel guilty. You'd be celebrating the fact that they're feeling calm and they're sleeping well. And so I think it's sometimes good to come at it from that angle of, it's you shouldn't feel guilty, and it's I guess that being kind to yourself shouldn't stop when things are going well, is basically what the point we want to drive, is that it's an all year round attitude that we can all continue working on, and I think that's a good positive thing to end on. So thank you so much for your advice. I know I'm going to take a lot away from this, and I'm sure that a lot of students who are listening will also take a lot away from this. So I
hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much. And I will see everyone in the next video. But I'm sure Katie will say bye. Cool. Wait, I've not stopped yet. I really hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. It's just so useful to have constructive advice right now. So thank you, Katie. I'll definitely be trying to implement some of that stuff and just generally try and be kinder to myself. And I really hope that you can try and do this too. So before we wrap up, I just want to let you know that each week we will also be linking relevant resources, always relevant to the topic for that week. So this week we have some recommended podcasts which are really interesting, and also some recommended apps that I've tried, so do go and check those out. And lastly, we do love to hear from you. So if you found anything from this week's video particularly helpful, or if you yourself have been trying different resources and think other students might benefit from them too, then do send them to us so we can maybe share these over the coming weeks. You can drop us an email The email address is on our website as usual, but it is counselling@imperial.ac.uk. And whilst I'm talking about the website, do continue to check this out as well, because we have lots of new things coming up, online support groups and workshops. So keep checking the website for updated information on what's currently going on within our service. So that's it. I really hope you enjoyed these videos and this content, and I really hope you will join me for next week's video, where we will be looking at how to look after your mind. So do join me, and I hope to see you then.